Good evening or afternoon or morning, whatever time it is that you are tuning in to tonight's virtual studio of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. My name is Dr. Stacy N.C. Grant, and I'm the international president and CEO of our 102-year-old community conscious, action oriented organization founded on January 16th, 1920, on the campus of Howard University by five trailblazing college co-eds that we refer to as our five pearls. Since 1920, we have been providing global service across the globe that directly affects positive change in our communities as we promote the highest standards of scholastic achievement while enjoying the priceless bond of sisterhood and demonstrated finer womanhood. As a premier community conscious, action oriented organization, our programs are designed to demonstrate concern for the human condition, both nationally and internationally, from New York City to Los Angeles, California, from Africa to Belgium, from London to Abu Dhabi, from Hawaii to the Bahamas, and everywhere in between. And during the month of October, we are focusing our efforts on breast cancer awareness, Get Engaged, our voter registration efforts, and domestic violence. Tonight, our conversation, Finding Your Voice, will be with Archbishop Mary Floyd Palmer, a proud honorary member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Archbishop Palmer, affectionately known as Bishop Mary, is the eldest daughter of the late Reverend Dr. Melvin and Mrs. Elizabeth Floyd, one of Philadelphia's legends, best known for his impactful street ministry for over 45 years and done with his unusual van that carried coffin and dummy on top. That's a conversation piece. A lifelong resident of Philadelphia, Archbishop Mary is a family woman of five adult children, seven grandchildren, one great grandson. She's a summa cum laude graduate of the Philadelphia High School for Girls. She excelled in her studies in athletics and music. She is a doctorate of ministry and PhD. She is just incredible. And as a public servant, she's the special deputy lieutenant of Philadelphia Sheriff's Office, Clergy Division, and presently holds positions in the United Nations as a certified international chaplain, peace ambassador, and is Her Excellency, the Deputy Chief Governor of the Department of Northeastern USA Division of the International Consulting Council. When does she sleep? I'm not quite sure. But despite all of that work, or in spite of, adding to her talent, she's an on air personality and the host of the award winning The Bishop Mary Show, featured on WWDB 860 AM every Monday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Now, despite a flourishing career in the public sector and law enforcement and private sectors, the call on her life for ministry came, and she began full time ministry in 2004. Her latest elevation there made her historic as the first female archbishop of any denomination in her home city of Philadelphia and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. She's also the first woman president and presiding prelate of the Philadelphia Council of Clergy Incorporated. To honor her father's legacy and work, she founded the Community Healing Project for All in 2019. And the purpose of that is to promote healing through communicating with and restoring your neighbor, one at a time, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, reaching all communities. And this extends her experience and her passion for the work that she does. Now, we would be here for the entire presentation for me to get into every detail of her bio. But tonight, there's one small portion that is not mentioned on her bio, and that Archbishop Mary Palmer is a survivor of domestic violence. Welcome, my amazing and beautiful soror, Archbishop Mary. Thank you so much for your time tonight as we talk about this critical conversation around domestic violence and how we are positioning ourselves as members of this sisterhood to be on the front line of advocacy to save lives and to help not only the communities we serve find their voice, but our members find their voice so that we can do all of the great service that we provide internationally. So I thank you again, Archbishop Mary Floyd Palmer, for joining us on the inaugural broadcast in Zeta Phi Beta's virtual studios. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, my sister, my grand. Thank you so much, Dr. Grant, for this wonderful invitation. I am overwhelmed by the honor to be on the inaugural show, and certainly am so grateful to have this opportunity to share with you and everyone else.
Thank you so much. And as you say, share, we want to make sure that everyone watching share this broadcast, share it on your public media, social media pages. You never know whose life will be touched by the
Mhm.
information that we have tonight. So don't keep it to yourself. Feel free to share and let others know that they can watch, they can listen, and they can learn, because we never know where our breakthrough and our opportunities are coming from. So I want to thank all of you who are active in the chat and who are here, other survivors that are sharing that you are survivors. We are so happy that you took time out to be here and participate in tonight's program. So, Archbishop, can we talk about your story? You know, when I mentioned that you're a survivor, and this is a passionate topic for you, and all
Mhm.
that you do in ministry, outside of ministry, in the public and the private sector, can we learn a little bit more about you?
Well, first, let me first say that the first pace to healing is telling your story. And the Bible does tell us, as I believe, that by the word of your testimony, it might just impact and help someone else. That everything that you have experienced in your life is not for you, but for the God in you to be able to help another. My story began when I was in college and I was on a full scholarship. I met a really dynamic young man, as I thought. And after courting for a little bit, I decided, listen, I want to find out more about him. My parents were really overprotective, particularly my father. They didn't like us to date. They figured that you had a vision and a plan for your life. And as I grew up, they told you what you're going to be. And my goal was to be a doctor. Obstetrics and gynecology was the passion I was going to be in, particularly to help those women who may not receive the best health care and to be able to give back to my community through that genre. And it soon became a love thing, or as you say, it's a groove thing. And he finally said to me, "Listen, let's make a life together." And I'm 400 or 500 miles away from home, and I'm a little homesick. And I figured that I would leave from where I was at, and I would make my way back home to Philadelphia and confront my parents and let them know how I'm feeling. I'm not quite grown yet, but I figured I might as well go out on a limb, fight for what you want. And the first thing that was assigned to me was when my parents said no. You do realize that I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't know if I was hearing someone speaking and whether it was me or not. Um, Forgive me for the pause. But nonetheless, um, the only one that I know of that can, uh, is that me? I'm sorry. I'm hearing someone and I'm not quite sure.
No, it might be,
It might be in my background. Okay.
but it's fine. But we're hearing you loud and
I'm
clear
so
and getting into the
I'm hearing
story about.
something, and I know it's probably just the devil trying to interfere. So I'm going to tell him, you better leave me alone. Nevertheless, the only word in the alphabet that comes to mind is N and the. And a lot of us sometimes, when we hear the word no, it does something to our not only our mental state and our emotional state, it does something even to us spiritually. We always want to hear a yes, but a no means stop. And I did not necessarily want to hear no. I didn't want to listen to what my parents were saying. And so my mother and my father told me to make a choice, and I did. I did not choose or want to get married, but I grew up with principles. So I figure I might as well go ahead and get married. And the first thing that I started to notice is that while I had a beautiful soul and a beautiful look, and I'm gorgeous, and all these wonderful words of attributes, they started to change from you run your mouth too much, you're talking too much, you need to leave us alone, stop telling me what to do. And, the mantra that normally comes is, I'm a grown and you don't tell me what to do because you ain't my mama. And I started to say, well, I'm not trying to be your mama. I'm just trying to be the wife. And that led to a whole lot of level of conversation that became from the vocal to the actual tangible. And the tangibility of it happened with the first hit. Now, I was
Can can
shocked.
can I pause
Yes,
you for a moment there, Archbishop? You said it started with the words. It
right,
started with how you were addressed. That
right,
was the first warning sign. And then, well, let's go back a little bit. You said your parents gave you a warning.
right.
Now, when I was younger, I didn't think my parents knew everything. I knew they knew a lot. But until you become a parent, you kind of understand that frustration when you know something in your gut and you share it with your child, but they might not be receptive. So that was warning number one. Number
That's right.
two, it was the language. And
That's right.
the language preceded the first time you were struck.
That's correct. And
Okay.
so when you hear all these beautiful attributes, I mean, come on, ladies, we are fine as Zetas. We are all that and a bag of chips. We look good. We hear all these wonderful words, but pretty soon the tone will change because what was used as something to uplift you, to make you feel beautiful, to make you think that you're the most gorgeous person in the world, suddenly becomes you're ugly, I don't like you, you're too this, you're too negative. It shifts from positive to negative. And so I said, well, why are you talking to me like this? Why are you calling me like this? Why are you acting this way? And his thing is, I chose to do what I want to do. And so what? And what you gonna do about it? After that came the threats. I wish you would. I said, well, I don't have to put up with this. I have a mommy and a daddy back in Philly, and I can go home anytime. And he was just like, I wish you would. The veiled threat thing came. If you try, I'll kill you, or I'll kill them, or I'll hurt them. And you ain't going to tell nobody. Out of
So,
fear,
oof,
I
that
got quiet.
I
And I
keep
was
pausing
scared.
you. Look, I keep pausing you, Archbishop, because I want us to hear at a
Hmm.
deeper level how it builds its incremental steps.
That's correct.
So you said it was the voice, the tonality, the
Right.
words,
It
and
went
then the
from
threat.
warm and soft to harsh and brutal to
Mhm.
demeaning and insulting. And then when I revolted back, because I'm a fighter by nature, I'm not going to tolerate it. I don't stand for it. Back up. And I'm saved and all of that. But there's parts of me Jesus ain't got yet. So when I wanted to get to that point, that's when he made the veil threats. And finally, I said, you're not going to tell me what to do. And I attempted to leave. And in doing so, that's when we had our first altercation. And I got hit so hard, I lied to you not, I saw stars. And after he hit me, he just looked at me and he said, listen here, if you think that you're going to leave me, I'll kill you. And then threw me in a closet where I stayed for I don't know how many hours.
I,
And
whew,
while sitting in the dark, I'm sitting here saying, this is a bad dream. This is not reality. What happened? But it wasn't as if I didn't know it was going to escalate to that. In my mind, emotionally, after I got married at our reception, he decided he wanted to go to the strip club with the guys. And I'm like, well, we just got married and we got something to do. Yes, I was a virgin. I not been with him. And he was just like, I married you, didn't I? I'll get that when I get back. And 3 days later, when he got back, it was probably one of the worst experiences for me I've ever had. And I said something, and he was just like, I never had no complaints. And so don't you start nothing. And then I got mouthy. And then next thing I know, I'm like, you're not going to tell me and you're not going to threaten me. You don't know who my daddy is. One word begets another word and it gets very kind of loud. And next thing I know, that's when the hit. So I tell ladies that when it goes from You're the most beautiful thing. You're the most intelligent thing. I wouldn't know what to do without you. I think you're the gorgeous thing. God has made you just for me. All of these wonderful things that we love to hear, ladies. And the moment that it shifts, where there's a complaint that becomes grievous. I don't like your hair. Why are you wearing that makeup? How come you wearing that dress? Why you look like that? You're an elephant. You're a boat. I saw it similarly in the movie Why Did I Get Married, where her husband was very vocal and insulting, brought along his mistress, and she was supposed to like it. And she had not yet gotten her voice until she met someone who told her that you have more value than that. And not only through the care for her, but the support of her, she was able to say it. I went through all of that and I suffered in silence. I became very withdrawn. I didn't talk to anybody out of fear of what he could do. The problem with that is that when you become silent too long, you become numb. And when you become numb, you're not aware of danger. You're sort of self absorbed, you're sort of withdrawn, you're listening, and you're scared, you're fearful. You're literally walking on eggshells every day, hoping and praying that something will break. Well, when I turned off my care for him, whether he brought the ladies in the house, whether he was out all night, whether he was doing what he felt he was big enough and man enough to do, I didn't care if he came, I didn't care if he left. I was glad when he wasn't there. But what I did not see is that he existed and became animated to responding to my reaction. And when I shut down my reaction, he went to the next best thing, my children. Because when I was numb, I was not looking for it. I thought he would never hurt a kid, he would never hurt his own. And he did. He hit my son, who was he was smacking me, and my son ran up the steps at the tender age of 3.
This is a story, and we're going to give her an opportunity to come back in, a little interference tonight. And thank you all so much for participating in the chat. And, just hearing 3 days later after your honeymoon that he returned, hearing how it escalated from words that became the actual hit and then the guilt and then becoming numb. This conversation is necessary. And the reason why we wanted to broadcast this, because somebody that we know might be going through a situation, because when you're suffering in silence, then you put on a happy face. You move about trying to create a normal when what you're going through is not normal. And to be able to have these conversations, the work that we do within the sisterhood, to have forums, to have guest speakers, this is why Zetas are at the forefront of answering the challenges and the social ills of the day. It is not okay to become so desensitized to a toxic situation. We have seen in the news over and over again these unfortunate stories because of fear of leaving. And Archbishop, I'm just so grateful that you're being so open and vulnerable with your story. You're sharing and telling us step by step what you went through. And somebody listening tonight might have been in a space where they didn't want to speak up. They didn't want to acknowledge that as you started telling us the story, that sounds like my story, or that sounds like something I've seen, something, and we're going to get into that later before we close out the broadcast. But I want you to continue where you were with the fact that it got to your kids because you
It
were
got to my
numb.
children. And that's when I knew that becoming so numb brought danger to my children.
Mm.
And even now, some 30 years later, as a mom who would happily defend and protect them, my 2 older children, my son and my daughter, got the brunt of it. My son defending me because I became so numb, ended up getting knocked down the steps.
Mm.
17 steps. And it was 1/8 of an inch away from breaking his neck.
Oh, Jesus.
Was in the ER, and the doctor looked at me. He said, "You know, he's lucky because you should have had his neck broken and be in a cast and maybe paralyzed for the rest of his life." And he said, "I don't know what your situation is, miss, but this was not an accident." Why? Because he had the knuckle prints on the side of his face. I went to the police. I filed a report, but he was well connected with the politics in the city. His mother knew the mayor and all of that. So every report that I made ended up not getting filed. It was considered adjusted by police. And I went to a shelter. I reached out to people who kept on saying, "We got help for you." And they just kept looking at me. And as soon as I said my name, "Oh, you must be, are you the daughter in law of,
Mm,
are you the wife of, oh, girl, you need some mental health." Because I just know that's not the case.
mm.
I even went to my mother in law, my late mother in law. She looked at me and she said, "Well, you stop making them so mad, then you
Ooh,
won't keep on getting hit." So I'm going to
ooh.
another woman expecting her to say, "Let me knock this son up against his face because he has no business doing this." And she was very complicit. But then I came to find out that she had been in a similar situation. And so she just settled. I didn't feel at that time that I could go to my parents, one, because I knew my father would come immediately to Chester and kill him. There was no doubt in my mind. I did not want blood on my father's hands. My mother would kill him too. So both of my parents were up in jail defending me. And I mean, it was just this whole thing. And I reached out to the church that I was attending at the time. The pastor says to me, "Oh, pray about it, baby."
Mm,
Okay, I've done that. I went to the mother of the church. She said, "Well, just learn to be silent
mm,
and be a good wife. And God eventually will deliver you."
mm.
Okay?
Learn to be silent and be a
Learn
good
to be
wife.
silent. She said, "This is your punishment for defiance. You said no to your parents, and God is punishing you. And you need to take your lessons well."
Mm,
Okay. So when I was beginning to say to myself, "I have to find a way of escape," I began to put some stuff aside in a big duffel bag. And I was planning to leave. I called my mother, who I was not, my late mother, who I was not on good terms with. It was from the old school, who believed that when you make your bed, you lie in it. I said, "Mommy, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm ready to come home." She said, "You are?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Do not have me come down here and get you. And then you want to run back and fight me over the man you chose to marry." I said, "I will not." The day before she was coming, she said, "I'll be there tomorrow." I said, "He's off. He'll be in the house. I don't want a confrontation. Come the day after." That day before, he was in the house. And I was upstairs putting away some clothes, and I heard this horrendous scream. I ran down the steps, and it was my baby daughter, who was just about a year old, whose skin was literally peeling off of her
mm,
because the hot water, he said, accidentally spilled on her. Now, how did she pick up a ceramic cup and pour it on her head? I don't know, while you're sitting there watching her, but her skin literally started coming off of her. I picked her up. I rushed her down to the hospital, which was, by God, only a block away. And when I walked in, the doctor looked at me and he says, "You might as well prepare for the worst because she won't make it." If I did not know that there was a God,
mm,
I couldn't moan, I couldn't cry, I didn't know who to call. I had called my mom, she didn't answer. And the only other person I knew to call was my late aunt, who was from the Church of God in Christ. And I said, "Auntie, she's not going to make it." She said, "Let me get your mother and we're coming." She was in a coma for 7 days. I was praying by her bed and I knew I couldn't pray no more. And the doctor said, "She's not going to make it. She has 105 temperature. She won't be worth anything. Just put her in peace and let her go to sleep." I couldn't sign her death warrant. And my aunt said, "We're on our way." My aunt came in speaking in tongues, talking all kinds of languages. I didn't know nothing about tongues utterance. I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever it is going to do, let's just get it on." And she walks up to me, and I'll never forget it. "Your silence
mm,
brought about this destruction. So if you've been silent this long, shut your mouth and watch God."
mm.
I went over, I sat down because she told me to. And they went in there and prayed and came out and went to go get coffee and donuts. And she said, they came back and prophetically said to me, don't let them touch her, cut her, operate on her 7 days. In the seventh hour, on the seventh day, you'll see a miracle. I'm like, okay, here we go again. You know how we hear these things and
Mhm.
we watch it at church. And I'm like, I've been in this all my life. I ain't even trying to play with this. But I was too scared to go against it. And on the seventh day, she walked into the hospital, 10 minutes to the seventh hour. And we all walked into the baby's room. She's in critical care in the burn unit. And the doctor starts to unwrap her. And she had grown skin.
Jesus. Mm.
And I looked and he looked and he said, who started surgery? They told me it's going to be 28 grafts. It was going to be horrific. She'll be disfigured. Somebody will take care of her. They said, I saw sin. I looked again. He touched it. He said, who did this? My aunt said, the Lord touched her at 7 minutes after 7. So you would believe there's a God. Because you do not grow skin from third degree burn.
Mm.
Over 50% of your body.
Mm. Wow.
I literally fell out. They gave me some smelling salts when I woke up. My daughter looked at me. She said, Mommy, first time I heard her voice in 9 days. And she sat up.
Mm. Mm.
And I knew then,
Mm.
going forward,
Mm.
I could never be silent. That if I see something, I have to say something. My aunt looked at me then and said, you're going to be a powerful preacher and you're going to be high in the Lord's church. Your great grandmother already prophesied it and you tried to dirty yourself so you couldn't do it. But God now is giving you a miracle that every day you wake up and you start thinking that you have to be silent about something that you ought to do without embarrassment or humiliation or fear, that you ought to be a voice for someone who can't even speak for themselves. And since that day, and I accepted the call, I have been vocal because the Bible says you cannot allow your voice to be taken from you. Yes, there's a time to be silent. There's a time where you and the Lord and you're listening and He's talking, but on certain things that we are complacent about, that we refuse to speak about righteous anger or the things that God has given to us to do, and we want to sit back and fast and pray and see about the matter. No, He has put me through this particular situation in rebellion that almost cost me my children's lives.
Mm.
It made me realize that you are not that arrogant. You are not that narcissistic. You are not that grown. And when I have a calling on your life and an anointing on your life, you can't dirty yourself enough for me to use. You better read my Bible because there were plenty of them and they still did my work. So you can play with this thing if you want to, but you can't get away from it. One way or another, I will break you. And when I break you, the pain will make you hot.
Mm.
Because you know, when the right pain hits you,
Oh,
what
yes.
do we say? Oh God, we know who to call on. And so
Mm.
after that, I forged, I got back in good graces. I submitted to authority. I went through a restoration period. And the only thing I asked the Lord to do was to restore my children and help them to be healed. That the older two who were exposed to it would not carry it to the next generation.
Mm.
I admitted my wrong. I acknowledged it to them. And we went through a healing process. And today, my oldest son is 40,
Mm.
father
Wow.
of three wonderful children. My daughter is a beautiful girl who can sing her behind off, act and create, has never had one surgery.
Wow.
The angel touched her and she was completely healed and is the proud mother of my three grandchildren. And I'm telling you that God can do it. But does He always have to break you?
Mm.
Does He always have to break you? Because here's my fault. I never asked Him if it was His will for my life.
Mm.
And I understand that there are feelings and emotions and there are things that we go through. But when you are called to Him, you have to get His will. And when you decide to go against His perfect will, His permissive will allow some things that will shape character, redefine you, reshape you, cause you now to be able to say, Lord, I'm sorry, and mean that thing. I'm not talking about an emotional moment. I'm not talking about being at the altar crying and lying one more time to Him. I'm talking about sold out for Him and acknowledging that He is the Lord of your life. And so this is not something I just do. People say, well, how you be an archbishop? I'm not just an archbishop. I just don't do archbishop work. I don't just do. I am ministry
Mm.
because that's what God has shaped me to do. And to be able to now empower women to say, baby, if you come through half of what I came through, the power that is in you because you love Jesus is the same power that got him up out of the grave. And I know it's hard. And I know you've been down on your knees. And I know you made a mistake. But when you acknowledge, repent, he will reconcile and restore.
Woo! I mean, the chat is going crazy. Everyone, we can feel your heart. It's beyond powerful. And the beauty of it is we know that everyone might not subscribe or are faith and believers. But what's undeniable is that even the doctors, even the orderlies, even the nurses had to acknowledge like there was no way this could happen. Like science could not
That's right.
explain how your daughter is healed. So
That's
I get
right.
a little confused myself, Archbishop, when people don't understand that there's the God, but we all have a right to believe what we believe. And
That's
we
correct.
have varying members who have different beliefs, but we were founded as a Christian organization. We were founded by 5 courageous, trailblazing co-eds who knew that there had to be a God to give them the kind of tenacity that was necessary for 102 years ago to found what we celebrate today. And I love the fact that you are able to share a testimony where so many saw the impossible be possible with the instructions that you were given, that you actually listen, because this is not an easy story. And we know that this story can be triggering. And we want to be able to share with you how you can get help, how you can share hotline information. And we're going to put that on the screen so that you can get the resources that are available in the national hotline. And I'm going to have that scrolling across so that you can have that, but also the power in your voice, because now everybody heard your voice. There's no stopping you from telling your story. I read the bio and that was just a quarter of a little bit of your bio, but I wanted people to understand that your experience is vast. Your academic repertoire is beyond amazing, but your passion for this work is simply incredible because you lived it. This is not theory. This is not you're empathetic because that you've been in a situation where you've watched somebody go through it. You live this, and your children were affected because you did not find your voice. You weren't able to step away, and you're not the only one in a similar situation. So to be able to have this broadcast tonight speaks volumes of the power of our voice, that we can use an international platform to be able to share the testimony, but then move us into the action. So before we start giving some additional information on
Mhm.
how those who might be in a situation might need additional help, the steps. Let's recap the steps, because what I've heard, what I've researched, and what I've learned from those who I'm close to, who have similar stories to you, is that the strategy for an abuser is always the same, right? When we talk about how it starts, and it starts with this wonderful, inviting conversation, and how amazing you are. And then the conversation shifts to some
Mhm.
controlling words, to some interesting ways to describe their view on what relationship should be. And then it starts to escalate in volume. And
Yes,
then after the volume and the escalation, then it gets into the threats and
that's
the
right.
intimidation. So we go through the intimidation where if you can't leave me, where are you going to go? Who's going to believe you? And then the dangerous part that I really want us to listen carefully to is that it can happen in safe places. What are safe places? In houses of worship, right? It can happen in safe places like organizations where we are dating members of other organizations. This is being sponsored by one of the Divine Nine organizations. We have multiple 2.5 million of us across the globe that make up all these organizations. Be considered a safe place, and you date these people and it happens there. So there's nowhere where you think that you're escaping the possibility of an abusive relationship. So you highlighted that. And then you highlighted what happens if you don't find your voice, if you don't ask for help, when you're numb, when you've kind of checked out of the situation, and your children become a target. And for anyone who is a parent, that's game over if you start putting a hand or touching or hurting or harming a child. And
Let
then
me tell
to
you,
your point,
it took all of Jesus with me because
I,
I was ready to kill the Negro. And can
I,
I be even more transparent? I
yeah.
tried,
Well, hey,
but
oh,
I missed.
mm,
And that's
mm,
because my mother felt something in her spirit and got down and prayed. I don't know what that child getting ready to do, Lord, but don't let it happen. I
mm,
tried and missed.
mm,
But, and I'm not proud of that. But in that moment, when you come at the, there's that part of me that can, just tell Jesus, I got this.
mm.
I
You
know
gonna
you
do
in
his
heaven, but
job.
I got this. I'll deal with you when I get there. Like that side that can come up out of anybody who really, really gets pushed to the point. And I think we have seen it in movies that have been paramount to us, and we shun away from them. We didn't like Color Purple because it showed the wrong side of what we went through. We didn't like Medea's Family Reunion, which is another one where it was very evident about domestic violence and how people respond to it. But eventually, we are not made to be abused. There is something within us that has a fight within us. And some of us don't know how to be able to do it. And now at 59, I can look at them and say, listen, thank you, Lord, that you heard my prayers, that there's restoration with my children, that my grandchildren are not in those situations, that they're all saved. They
Hmm.
know the Lord. They're actively serving in ministry in various ways. That my grandchildren, except for the baby, knows you, has accepted you, and are baptized. To see it on to the second generation. And for me, really now, to particularly watch out for my grandgirls.
Right.
Who you going with? What did he
Hmm.
see? I have one daughter. She wanted to go out on a date. And the guy was acting up. And I came to the door with a gun. Now what you gonna do, boo? Because let me tell you something. This works.
Whew.
I did that before Martin Lawrence did it with his daughter.
They,
Listen, let
they
me
took
tell you something.
they
You
took
not
that
you
from
she
you.
is not repeating the sin of her mother up in here, and you don't qualify.
Hey,
Now, that may
mm,
not be what we like to do because we allow our children, to have options, choices, negotiations. But as long as you in my house, I'm not allowing danger to come in. I'm not allowing you to feel that you can call and come up on my steps, knock on my door and say, hey, yo, I want to talk to. What?
mm,
I don't know. The yos don't live here. And I slammed the door. She almost had a pivotal fit. But eventually he got himself together. And then when his mother and I got together, she said, well, he is a little pimp. He got another girl that might be pregnant by, but your daughter's such a nice girl. I think maybe she should leave him alone. This is when we as women who know that our sons have a tendency of a behavior. My late mother-in-law knew that he was that
yes.
way. Why? Because he had already slapped her and punched her already.
Oh wow.
And
He slapped his
nobody
mother
told
too.
me. And I was still confused about why he was alive. Because I would have never been living if it were my mother, my grandmother, and nobody in the family. But
Not at
when
all.
you pass it on generationally and you are silent. The first time my son hit his sister, I I baptized him on the seat of his understanding, so he couldn't do nothing else but cry out, God, please help me, because you will not repeat the sin of your father up in here. You are not her mother, you are not his sister, and you ain't fighting me. And I
You said,
knew that there
wait.
was a breaking that needed to
Ooh,
happen.
you
So
said if
we
the
as
seed.
women have to take responsibility. And I
Oh,
took mine. And
ooh,
I took a lot for me to get from nothing, from
mm,
sleeping in a shelter to sleeping on a park bench to being in places to
mm,
come from nothing. But the one thing that God said to me is, you need to restore your relationship and go home. I didn't
mm.
want to go home. Can I be real? Are you
And
kidding me? My
I,
mother, I ain't
mm,
hardly going back to that place, but that was the safest place because I couldn't get it from the church. I couldn't get it from the community. I couldn't get no help from the hospital. Couldn't get no help from organizations. And I knew one thing: my mother loved her grandchildren, and she killed me over. And I knew that I needed help.
mm-hmm.
I needed help. not only for
Yes.
my healing, but for their safety.
Mm,
And doing it, she let me know it'll be a cold day before I ever forgive you. But by the grace of God, the greatest joy I had was when she looked at me and she said, I'm so proud that you're my daughter. And I thank God that you're an excellent mother. It took some time. It took
right.
8 years before that came. But I
Wow.
worked and I pressed and I saved and I went to doing the ministry of saying to other women, I checked out my girlfriends. What's going on with you and Obey? What's going on with you and Obu? Well, we had an argument. He kind of slapped me. What?
Mm,
And the domestic violence that's going on now between teenagers is absolutely unmistakable. So, this is something that the devil has organized, not only to help us lose who we are. You are fearfully and wonderfully made.
that's right. And your
God
answer.
made you, and there's not another one like you in the world. There is not another person with your DNA. He made you special. He made you specific. Your hair color, bought or not, your nails, your eyes, your face, your figure, your weight. He took time to have you created, the only one in the entire world. And you want to question how special you are? Not another human being can dictate that. You walk proudly, you put your head up. And if you're a heavy girl, wear a girl. If you're a thin one, smile too. Whatever it is that he made you to be glad because he didn't make a mistake. He said in Genesis, I made everything, and everything I made was good. Now,
Mm.
did we mess up? Yep. But that don't mean he made a mistake because he knew you were good from the beginning. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to preach. I'm
Look,
getting a
look,
little
look, look.
excited. Let me calm and cool. Let me hold my hope, as the old folks would say.
Ooh,
Hold your hope, boo.
hold your hope. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Archbishop, I tell you, this has been such a transparent and a rich dialogue about a very important conversation. And, as you see some of the remarks in the chat, and it's touching people, they're survivors who are listening and saying that sounds like my story, that this is what happened to me. They're asking what happened to your family, and you shared what happened with your mom, but they want to know what happened to your ex. There's always somebody, well, what happened to him? There was one person with the church thing up, like, well,
Well,
what happened?
he ain't dead yet. He's
Did
somewhere
he?
walking around in a county city, someplace not too far away. And let me tell you how much God is funny. He brought me back to the state institution in the city where he lives in, on the same side of town. I ain't running to the Negro yet. But what am I doing at the state institution? I'm teaching men, have been for 24 years, weekly, about re-entering society and not carrying what they've done and what they've been through back to their homes, and then perpetuating the sin again. And so the guys that are in my class, I give it to them straight up with no chaser. I don't have any COs in the room because they need that safe space to be able to deal with themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So my class that I have developed has been embraced by that institution and other institutions throughout the state, that I'm helping our men who return home not to perpetuate the violence that they have experienced or they have done. And that if they're going to come back and take their rightful places in their families, they need to begin with the healing of others and healing of themselves. And so, out of all of that, the things that you need to watch for is when someone changes their behavior, the way they dress, their makeup. Tonight, I didn't get my lashes, girl, and my bright pink lipstick. I didn't get it all on. I'll put a little, little something to kind of cover all the wrinkles. And I wanted to be naked because that's what it takes. The glamour and the glitz hides a whole lot. So does a first lady's hat.
Woo,
Oh Lord, I'm sorry.
woo,
Mm,
you went there.
I hit
Woo.
that, but
Mm,
you'd be surprised that makeup covers a whole multitude of sins. And I had makeup that kept it going. But it wasn't until I got naked that I had to look at myself. Like we are to every now and then in front of the mirror and say, Lord, what do I like about myself? What don't I like with myself?
mm.
And how can I make sure that I know and accept who I am, flaws and all? And
Oh,
in being naked, when you see the change in behavior, then you watch that they're isolated. They don't come around family. They're not with any friends. They're all of a sudden very secluded. They're not inclusive. And then the last thing is that the isolation brings about silence. They fake. How you doing? Oh, blessed and highly favored in the Lord. Oh, how you feel? I'm all right. One word answers, hardly anything. But here's the wonderful thing. Familiar spirit
Mm.
know one another.
Mm.
Just like alcoholics know alcoholics and smokers know smokers, so do abusers know abusers, and the abused know it too. You may not want to face it because it's your deep, dark secret. And if you're a prophet or apostle or a pastor, or you're the first lady, or you're a mother, or you are a corporate exec, or you are a police officer, or you whoever you are, you don't want nobody to know that you were weak and you subscribe to that. Let me tell you something. The strength is not in the abuse. The strength is not in allowing it to be. The strength is when you're able to stand up and say, I might have allowed it. I might have even helped to perpetrate it. But the strength is when I say, not another day. The strength comes when you pick yourself up, as grandma would say, and put your big girl pants on, and you say, not another day. And if I got to start from nothing, I'll start from nothing and become something. The wonderful things that we have able, that God has gifted us to now be silent, and this world needs it. And how dare we, when He has created the world to talk, we suddenly become silent. He's
Mm.
even given us the voice over the various tones of our larynx to be able to say something. So if you see something, say something. Only cowards be quiet, because silence is consent. It's also complacency. For those of you that may be listening and would say, but you don't know my story and I don't know how to get out. When there is a will, there is a way. Now, the way ain't always easy. Let me be clear. Ain't nobody coming by swooping you, putting you on a helicopter, flying you off to a Caribbean island, and you're going to be there for the rest of your life. You might have to take 3 steps back. You might be broke but sick. You might have to work a menial job before you can get into your career. The Lord is able to restore everything the cankerworm won. I was supposed to be Dr. Mary Floyd. I was supposed to be Dr. Mary. I am. I'm just not an OBGYN. That's what I wanted to be, but God restored me to be able to have 2 doctorate degrees. Come on here. And it's not what I designed, but it's what He blessed me with. So when you're looking at what I lost, once you step into His will, and I get what Grant is saying, those of you that, don't have the same level of faith, sweetheart, I can only tell you that there is something, even you as a woman, the part of you that comes from our ancestors that just did not lay down and die.
Mm.
That even if that's just your faith of the ancestors and where you come from, the heritage of your family, your grandma, your great grandma, the heritage, those women went through whatever they went through, believing in God or not, they just would not give in. And you have that in you. Of course, it's greater when God is in you, because greater is He that's in you than he that's in the world. But if you got to hold on to something, you hold on to your faith, or you hold on to your will to stand up and fight and use your voice. I
Mm.
will not. That's how we came through the civil rights. That's how we became a voter. That's how we are in the places we are now, because we are crying loud and sparing not. And this is not the way we are supposed to be. We are the best part of His creation. We are the crown with the rubies and the diamonds and the pearls and the sapphires. He said, I made you my crown and glory. And that's why I made you last, because you are the best. And crowns don't get on the ground, boo.
Mm.
They sit up on top of the head. So you better start walking like the fine Z5B woman that you are. And if you need some help, holler at your girl. I don't care where you're at. It ain't nothing but a train ride, plane ride, or a drive ride. And we can work this out so that you can be the best that God expects you to be. And if you say, well, I don't believe in no God, well, then be the best that you can be.
Mhm.
Stop being afraid. Fear is the one thing that gripped me
Mm.
so much that I never saw danger.
Wow.
Do not get to the place of numb. It's best for you to be who you can be and never be silent for wrong. It's
Woo!
not popular. It's not popular. You
Mm.
may lose friends,
Mm.
family, and a whole lot, but the right thing will always win out. And trust me, in time,
Mhm.
You'll be vindicated. I've seen it over and over and over again personally in my life. And I certainly hope that those of you that are listening will realize that it's best for you.
Mhm.
And at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, you'll be blessed.
Oh, Archbishop, I don't even know where to begin to say thank you for sharing your story tonight. Thank you for being so transparent, not only about the experience, but about all of the context in which it happened, about calling out those things that many people don't want to share, don't want to talk about, don't want to address, and suffer in silence. But not on your watch. Not on our watch. As members of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, we do this work because our mission and our goal is to leave this planet better than how we found it. It was the fire in the belly of our five trailblazing pearls who understood that we needed to speak up for the social ills of the day, that we needed to be at the forefront of being engaged, that we needed to give the kind of quality service that we're known for. And as a community conscious, action oriented organization, this is one of the many areas that we address. And I want to thank all of the members of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated for not only participating tonight, but for the work that you're doing in your local chapters, in your states, in your countries, to make sure that we get this message out. The hotline.org is one of many of the resources that are available. We have SOARs who themselves are involved on the front line of advocacy, who are working with programs and organizations to make sure that no one dies or suffers on our watch. So we invite you to continue this conversation, to continue to find ways that you can share the warning signs, that you can give information, that you can give encouragement. No matter what they are going through, there is help. And if it's you, please don't suffer in silence. Don't get caught up in the shame of what you think it is. You don't want people to know because you're a woman with a certain status or attached to a certain organization or a church, and you don't want anyone to know. We have to completely eradicate all of that because we're losing too many lives. And post COVID, we had an increase in the
Yes.
levels of domestic violence cases. And it just shakes you at the core to think that in 2022, we are still dealing with these demons of the past that continue to show up. And why you talked about breaking generational curses is so important, that your children and now your grandchildren can know who they are and how to hold on to their voice, that they've been able to see firsthand and to learn how not to repeat the cycles. And you've also mentioned how you help abusers. You've dedicated time to going into the prison, to talking to those who are behind bars and coming back out into the population, that they don't come back out and repeat the same offenses that could have been a part of why they ended. This was a holistic approach on opening up the door and the conversation around finding your voice. So not only that we can help the victims, we could also do our part to support resources like what you're doing to even help the abuser rehabilitate. None of us are the judges. We can't sit in the judgment seat, but we can make sure that we save lives. And we thank you for sharing your story. And how can our sorors and those who we've invited to come, because this will be shared broad and wide, how can they get in contact with you if they want that help? You put the SOS out there. You said call if you need help, and I will be there. So we know that somebody's life was touched by tonight. We know that we've shared information as a call to action of what they can do next. And when you think about the statistics that are startling around domestic violence, and we want to know that tonight we did a part. If one person is courageous enough after this conversation, if one person, their life is saved, then this time tonight was not in vain. So as we close out, please tell us how we can stay in contact with you for those who might need additional support.
Well, certainly, if you feel that you want to do so by email, you can send an email to me, which is direct to me at prelate.pccglobal@gmail.com. That is maintained only by me, and no one else has access to it, so it is secure. Prelate, PRELATE.PCC at gmail.com. And then if you need to, a more prevalent way, if you must reach out to me, my cell phone is already all over the web and my website and everything. So it ain't no big top secret. It's a number I've had for 37 years. It's gonna be the same number, I guess, to when Jesus come. So you can call me directly. You can text me at 215-901-3372. 215-901-3372. And if you just say, hey, I need to talk, hey, I need some guidance, hey, I need prayer, hey, I need somebody to listen. And if I know or am able to help, I certainly will. And if I can't directly, I will reach out to those that I know may be able to help you wherever you may be. I
Absolutely.
don't do this because it's for accolades. As I shared with you, Grant, I'm hoping that this will be something that we will continue in conversation. There's a lot of hurting people, and
Mhm.
sometimes one time is not enough. But as often as I'm able to share it or tell it in the space of this, or even individually to chapters or other places around in Zeta more intimately, I would be willing and availing myself. I'm proud to be a Zeta. I don't hide that fact. And folks know, yeah, don't mess with the blue. I know my Episcopal color is red, but I am blue through and through.
I love it. I love it. I mean, whose honorary member is better than ours? None. But I am so grateful for
Thank
you, for
you.
our time together, for your passion, for your work, for your transparency. And, as we've talked about the survivors that are here, we also want to acknowledge that it's not always just women. The statistics show us as well. Men who have suffered at the hands of abuse. So, this is a very expansive conversation. And this is
Mhm.
one of many ways that we will continue to be on the forefront as finer women of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. So, thank you all for joining tonight in our inaugural broadcast in the virtual official Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Studios. We hope that you not only subscribe to this channel, but make sure that you share this broadcast as a part of your effort to bring awareness to this very important topic because we want to continue to save lives. So take care, stay well, be safe, stay connected with us, and that as we bond together, link arms and aims, and honor the trailblazing spirit of the five women who had the vision for this
My
sisterhood
God.
sit in 102 years later, we will continue to embrace the extraordinary with our par excellence service. God bless you all and have a wonderful night.
God bless you.